Chúc mừng, đó là con trai, thai khỏe mạnh.
Con trai à? Tuyệt vời.
Em mừng quá, rất khỏe mạnh, mọi chỉ số đều tốt.
Hello, dear viewers. Today we followed a deeply emotional story about Huyen, who discovered she was pregnant while recovering in the hospital. What began as days filled with exhaustion and worry about her health suddenly turned into the most sacred joy of her life. She was going to become a mother. In the cold, quiet hospital room, a tiny new life became the light that brought hope and happiness back into her heart. The joy wasn't hers alone. When the man she loves found out he was going to be a father, his emotions overflowed. His fear and anxiety quickly transformed into pure happiness and determination to care for her in every possible way. From preparing nourishing meals with his own hands, to softly reminding her to rest, to placing his hand gently on her belly and promising to protect both mother and child, every small gesture reflected a love that was growing deeper and stronger. This story is not only about pregnancy, but about the beautiful journey of love, responsibility, and becoming a family. If you enjoy heartfelt family stories that are sweet, emotional, and full of meaning like this one, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next episodes. Thank you so much for your love and support.
The hospital room was painted in a pale shade of white that seemed almost too bright against Huyen's tired eyes. The steady beeping of the heart monitor and the distant sound of footsteps in the corridor blended into a quiet rhythm that filled the silence. For 3 days, she had been lying there, weak from a persistent fever that refused to go away. At first, she thought it was just exhaustion. She had been working too hard, sleeping too little, and ignoring the subtle warnings her body had given her. But when the dizziness grew worse and she nearly fainted at home, she had no choice but to be admitted for observation. Now, propped up slightly against the pillows, she felt fragile in a way she never had before. Her body was still heavy, her limbs aching as if she had run a marathon she couldn't remember starting. A thin blanket covered her, but she still felt a faint chill. She stared at the ceiling, lost in her own thoughts, wondering how something as ordinary as a fever could leave her feeling so vulnerable. When the door gently opened, she turned her head. The doctor walked in with a calm expression and a clipboard in hand. Huyen's heart tightened. She had been waiting for the test results all morning. There had been whispers between the nurses, a few extra blood tests ordered, and an ultrasound that no one had fully explained to her. A small part of her had started to suspect something unusual, but she was too tired to guess. The doctor stepped closer to her bed and offered a reassuring smile. "Huyen," he said softly, "I have good news for you." Good news? In a hospital room, the phrase sounded almost unreal. You're not just dealing with a fever, you're pregnant. For a second, the words seemed to float in the air, disconnected from reality. Pregnant. The syllables echoed in her mind as if they belonged to someone else. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the blanket. She blinked, trying to make sure she had heard correctly. I'm pregnant?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The doctor nodded. "Yes, early stage, but everything looks stable. The fever was likely due to exhaustion combined with hormonal changes. You'll need rest, proper nutrition, and regular checkups. But overall, this is wonderful news." Wonderful news! A wave of emotion surged through her, so suddenly that it almost took her breath away. The weakness she had felt moments ago seemed insignificant compared to the powerful realization settling in her heart. Inside her, quietly and invisibly, a new life had begun. A tiny heartbeat, a fragile, precious existence that was part of her and part of the man she loved. Tears welled up in her eyes before she could stop them. They slid down her temples and into her hair as she lay there, staring at the doctor in disbelief. She had come to the hospital feeling sick and drained. She had worried about her health, about missing work, about being a burden. And now, in the middle of that vulnerability, she had received the most unexpected gift. She slowly placed her trembling hand over her abdomen. It still looked the same. She felt no different physically, yet everything had changed. In that quiet hospital room, surrounded by sterile walls and medical equipment, Huyen felt warmth spread through her chest. Fear mingled with joy, uncertainty with hope. She was going to be a mother. The thought was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. But beneath it all was a deep, steady happiness, like a light turning on inside her heart, promising that from this moment on, her life would never be the same again. When he pushed open the hospital room door, his heart was already heavy with worry. For days, he had watched Huyen grow weaker, her laughter replaced by pale smiles and tired eyes. The moment he stepped inside and saw her lying quietly against the white pillows, his chest tightened. She looked fragile, almost too small beneath the blanket, and the sight made him blame himself for not noticing sooner how exhausted she had become. He quickly walked to her bedside, pulling a chair closer. "How are you feeling now?" he asked softly, brushing a loose strand of hair away from her forehead. His voice carried a tenderness mixed with anxiety. He had been trying to stay strong, assuring her that everything would be fine, but deep down, he had been terrified of hearing bad news. Huyen looked at him, her eyes shimmering in a way he couldn't quite understand. They were still slightly red from crying, yet there was something different in them, something brighter. She reached for his hand, her fingers cool but steady as they intertwined with his. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. His pulse quickened. For a split second, fear flashed through his mind. Was it serious? Was there something wrong? He tightened his grip unconsciously. "What is it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. She swallowed gently, her lips trembling into a fragile smile. "We're going to be parents." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if he needed time to translate what he had just heard. "Parents?" he repeated faintly. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks again, this time not from weakness, but from overwhelming emotion. "I'm pregnant." Silence filled the room, but it was no longer cold. It was stunned, sacred silence. His eyes widened, and then something shifted in his expression. The fear that had clouded his face dissolved, replaced by pure, radiant disbelief. He let out a shaky breath, almost like a laugh mixed with a sob. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice cracking despite his attempt to sound composed. She nodded again, squeezing his hand. In the next second, he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around her carefully, mindful of her fragile state. He buried his face gently against her shoulder, overwhelmed by a rush of emotions he had never experienced before. Joy surged through him so powerfully, it made his hands tremble. "I can't believe this. We're going to have a baby." He pulled back slightly to look at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He cupped her face gently, as if she were something precious and breakable. "Thank you," he said sincerely. "Thank you for giving me the greatest gift of my life." From that moment on, his entire demeanor changed. The anxiety that had weighed on him transformed into determination. He immediately began asking questions about her health, about what the doctor had said, about what she should eat, how much she should rest, what to avoid. He listened carefully, committing every detail to memory. He adjusted her pillow, making sure she was comfortable. He poured her a glass of warm water and held it for her while she drank. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, as if he now saw her not just as the woman he loved, but the mother of his child. Every few minutes, he glanced at her with a soft, almost disbelieving smile. It felt surreal. Just hours ago, he had been consumed by fear. Now, the hospital room seemed transformed into the starting point of a new chapter. He placed his hand hesitantly over hers, which still rested on her abdomen. Though there was no visible sign yet, he felt an invisible connection forming. In that quiet room, filled with the faint hum of medical equipment, he realized that his life had changed forever, and he had never been happier. From the day they learned the news, his world quietly shifted around a single purpose: taking care of her and the tiny life growing inside her. The hospital room, once a place of worry and uncertainty, slowly became filled with warmth because of his constant presence. He arrived early each morning, often before the nurses began their rounds, carrying a thermos in one hand and a carefully packed food container in the other. He had never been someone who spent much time in the kitchen. Cooking had always been simple and practical for him. But now he researched everything. He read articles late into the night about prenatal nutrition, watched videos on how to prepare gentle, nourishing meals, and even called his mother to ask for advice on traditional dishes that were good for expectant mothers. He wanted to make sure every bite Huyen ate was safe, healthy, and filled with care. When he opened the containers in her room, the soft aroma of homemade soup would replace the sterile hospital scent. Light porridge with minced vegetables, slow-cooked chicken broth, steamed fish seasoned just enough to be flavorful but not overwhelming, each dish was prepared with patience. He would sit beside her bed, adjusting the tray carefully, blowing on each spoonful before bringing it to her lips. "Eat slowly," he would remind her gently. "You're eating for two now." Huyen would watch him with tender eyes, her heart swelling with gratitude. Even when she insisted she could manage on her own, he refused to step back. He wanted to be involved in every small detail. He kept track of her medication schedule, setting alarms on his phone so she would never miss a dose. When she felt tired, he would help her shift positions, placing a pillow behind her back or massaging her shoulders to ease the tension. In the evenings, when the hospital grew quieter and the lights dimmed, he would pull his chair closer to her bed. Sometimes he would talk softly about their future, about how he imagined their child's first steps, their first laugh, the tiny fingers wrapping around his. Other times, he simply placed his palm gently over her abdomen, as if trying to feel something that was still too small to notice. "Little one," he would murmur with a shy smile, "be strong, okay? I promise I'll protect you and your mom." Huyen would smile through tears, her hand covering his. In those quiet moments, she no longer felt the fear that had once crept into her heart. The uncertainty of becoming a parent, the physical weakness, the vulnerability of lying in a hospital bed, all of it faded under the steady reassurance of his love. When she was finally discharged, his care did not lessen. At home, he reorganized their living space to make it safer and more comfortable. He insisted she rest while he handled chores, grocery shopping, and even laundry. If she tried to help, he would gently guide her back to the couch with a playful but firm look. "You're on special duty now. Your job is to rest and keep our baby healthy." Every small action, every bowl of soup, every whispered word and protective gesture was proof that his joy was not just in the announcement of becoming a father, but in the responsibility itself. And as Huyen lay beside him at night, feeling his arm wrapped securely around her, she understood that she was not walking this new journey alone. Together, with love and devotion, they were already building a home for the child who would quietly change their lives forever.